a demon.
Midnight, I think, is the closest to the comic, actually. I think Midnight was always an ally, adversary, that kind of guy that you don't quite trust, but yet at the end of the day, if you had to go into war with somebody, you'd go get him. The other character is Chaz. I mean, his sidekick kind of, actually he's more like an ally in the comic books. He's a guy that's about the same age. They've gone through a lot of the same stuff together. It was an interesting relationship. It was probably really the most adult relationship that John had in the comic. Now in the movie, it's taken a different stand, and Chaz becomes more of a sidekick.
When I was a kid, I could see things humans aren't supposed to see.
Late in the game, we finally, at least I did, thought we need some sort of backstory to say, where did this guy come from? So I said, you know, if a guy saw demons all the time, what was he like as a kid? I'm kind of surprised, though, that the main character has stayed the way he is all the way through. I mean, every single director, everybody came on, wanted that guy to stay who he was.
The idea was to go with a director with a visual sense, to sort of make sure that Constantine stayed young and hip. So therefore, we were looking to a younger, newer director. We met with many video and commercial directors, but Francis stood out, and he was smart in that we understand if from their work that they can cover the visual sense of it. But what everybody worries about is, can they tell a story and can they draw a performance? And that's what he focused on right away.
Keanu was actually the last person for me to meet with. He was kind of the last rung in everybody that I had to go through to get the job. And he had been off in Australia working on the Matrix films. And I believe it was the day he arrived home or the day after he arrived home from Australia, having been gone for 18 months. I had him come down to my office and I filled the conference room with my presentation that I had built up over these 5 months. 30 poster boards filled with stuff. I mean, it really sort of laid it out. You could really kind of see what the movie was going to feel like. And I think he liked what he saw. And, you know, we honestly really saw eye to eye about the character and about the story.
In the history and tradition of going from one form to any form has always kind of brought about disappointments for people in terms of how they, relate to the source material and to its interpretation. But I think that the heart and soul of it, we've really tried hard to keep intact.
When we found out that Constantine was not going to be British, of course, being the comic book company, we were surprised and wondering why that approach was being taken. But Keanu Reeves turned out a wonderful performance.
I think the film's an extraordinarily good translation. Francis Lawrence and the team really went rather than to the iconography or the outer dressing of what the character is, to the essence of the attitude.
It's a guy who just has problems in general with the rules in the world, and he has problems in general with the idea of fate, that there are rules he has to live by, good and bad. And that's what I've really fought for, and I even fought to put more of that back in there and more of that attitude back in there, that Constantine attitude.
There's very little about the character of John Constantine in the graphic novel and the comics that is anything like Keanu. They're very different physical types, different nations of origin, but we tried to sort of distill out the spirit of the source material rather than the actual sort of physical representation.
I didn't think bleaching Keanu's hair blonde was going to be right. We tried an olive-colored trench coat. All throughout pre-production, I thought he was going to wear an olive-colored trench coat. And when we first tested it, it didn't look good. So we went with a black one because that's what looked best and looked right for Keanu.
Our process with Keanu and Keanu's process with this movie was to do that, to sort of feel Constantine. And Keanu got this guy pretty quickly.
Keanu's completely, totally committed to what he does, to his work. As soon as I'll go, Keanu, and he'll go, yeah, and he's not there. And he's John. He's like deep in the character.
There's only so many women who sort of feel like if you place them in this world, could be psychic. Rachel, she's also physical enough that I bought that she could be a detective. And so it was that sort of combination that really drew me to her.
But you just don't know when you meet a director how they're going to be with actors, or how they're going to be on a set, or how they're going to be under the pressure of a 6-month shoot or a huge studio movie. And he has never, ever once, for 1 second, let me down, ever.
You're the one soul I would come up here to collect myself.
We toiled and toiled over Satan just because, you've seen so many versions. You've seen the beast, you've seen the seductive woman, you've seen the child, you've seen the well-dressed man. And it was, okay, who's our Satan gonna be? I just somehow saw him like Fagin, you know, this nasty, gross, kind of funny, I mean, just, you know, the nastiest of the nasty. And I thought Peter would be perfect for that. Satan is just this insouciant son of a bitch who never really needs to get angry. I mean, he's Satan. It's like, you know, he doesn't give a shit.
Your ego is astounding.
Gabriel.
Tilda Swinton is the person that I wanted for the role of Gabriel since the second I started thinking about casting of this movie. You know, I never thought in a million years she would ever do it. I really didn't.
3, 2, 1, action!
His idea was a sort of unisex, asexual. He wanted Gabriel to be androgynous.
It was this sort of slight manipulation to try and get her in. You know, we thought, okay, well, let's make sure we have some more mainstream names in this movie, you know, other than Keanu, before we ask for Tilda Swinton, who's more of an independent film actress. And we sort of plotted and planned and plotted and planned. It was time to go in, and, you know, the head of the studio just said, oh, her, she's great, sure. And it was no fight, no problem whatsoever.
I was sitting watching the first rough cut as they began to put the footage together, and you get to that beautiful scene where Constantine has gone to Gabriel, somewhat in search of God's mercy, somewhat to let steam off, and you have that beatific Tilda Swinton expression as she bends down and says,
You're fucked.
that's Vertigo, right in that moment.
There's something special about the character. He's the guy who is out there on the front line dealing with the dark forces in the world that other people don't want to deal with. Doing it in a non-traditional way.
It's difficult for me to say why John Constantine got through his first 12 issues. I think we just struck a lucky chord, found some resonance in the hearts of the readers that allowed Constantine to develop into the institution that it's now becoming.
He's been to hell and back. Nothing has seemed to stop him yet. So I think he has many, many years left.